man sold the perfect life. But when he posted his final defiant photo from a yacht, he didn't realize he was giving his former partner the ultimate motive. This is a story of the murder-suicide that proved the most successful facade can be destroyed in a single moment of rage. The question isn't who killed him, but was his own success the weapon? We all know the face of success. The suits, the speed, the endless inspiration. For hundreds of thousands of followers, the face of that dream belonged to William Todd Austin Jr. He was more than a businessman. He was a brand. The CEO of Credit Champs, Todd Austin built his empire on one simple promise: escape from debt, escape to freedom. For his own community and followers, Todd Austin was a true success story. He was a beacon of hope in the Dallas-Fort Worth community, especially in Arlington, Texas. His success wasn't just about spreadsheets. It was about inspiration. He hosted financial literacy classes. He mentored young entrepreneurs. And he taught people how to turn their lives around. But to maintain that brand, Todd had to live it. His entire social media presence was a curated, high-energy performance. He understood the economics of influence. You don't just sell credit repair. You sell the lifestyle that credit repair affords. This meant the constant display of material wealth, expensive jewelry, luxury travel, and custom vehicles. This pressure, this commitment to a flawless public facade, is what makes his eventual downfall so tragic. He was constantly performing, constantly proving that the dream was real. He was only 37 years old, and the performance was all-consuming. He had to be the dream, every hour of every day, in every post. But every empire, every meticulously crafted brand, hides a secret vulnerability. In early July 2025, Todd took his final bow on social media. It was a trip to Miami, a luxurious, aspirational tour he called his Miami Dump. The posts were deliberate. They showed a yacht slicing through blue water, a new diamond watch, expensive food, and the kind of total freedom and independence most people only dream of. For his followers, this was the ultimate proof the dream was real. The comments poured in congratulations, envy, and worship. He was celebrated. But for a man whose private life was complicated by a dissolved relationship, that public display of freedom carried a hidden weight. Was he trying to prove his success to the world, or to a very specific and very angry audience of one? The very essence of his brand, unrestricted independence, became a direct act of provocation. In the quiet suburbs of Arlington, someone else was watching those same photos. Someone who knew the man behind the filter, and someone who felt utterly betrayed by that display of unburdened success. That someone was Tmone Michelle Williams. At 37 years old, she was the mother of Todd Austin's child. Their romantic relationship had ended, leaving behind a deep, complex connection rooted in shared parenthood and a history they could not fully escape. Todd Austin had publicly moved on. His Instagram broadcast his new, unrestricted life. But when you are linked to someone through a child, freedom is often only an illusion. You remain tied to their reality, their pain, and their access to you. The public saw the mentor, but Tmone saw the father of her child flaunting his independence while she was left to deal with the aftermath of their separation. Todd Austin sold the world the image of freedom and success, but his public life was about to collide with his private reality in the most violent way possible. The final, fatal cost of his perfect life was about to be paid. We have to ask ourselves, was this Miami trip a simple, proud celebration of hard-earned freedom? Or was it the final, deliberate act of public provocation that pushed Tmone Williams into a spiral of rage and jealousy, setting the final scene for a tragedy that would leave a child an orphan? The date was Friday, July 11th, 2025. Just after 10 a.m., Todd Austin was inside the Salon and Spa Galleria on South Cooper Street. This location is a deliberate choice for this narrative. It's a place of routine and personal care, barbers, stylists, and clients looking for relaxation. It was the last place anyone expected to see violence. The sheer normalcy of the setting amplified the terror of the crime. Todd was in a barber's chair, completely relaxed. He was in a vulnerable position, perhaps talking business or casually scrolling through his phone, likely still riding the high of his Miami trip. This routine state of unreadiness is what the prosecution would later note. He was caught entirely unaware. This was not a confrontation on a street corner. It was an execution in a moment of public, but isolated, calm. The professional who was cutting his hair later Bika, me one of the most critical witnesses, a person forced to confront a brutal domestic conflict at point-blank range while simply doing their job. This was a murder that burst out of the private sphere and violently disrupted the lives of innocent working people. At approximately 10:15 a.m., the normalcy shattered. Tmone Michelle Williams entered the salon. Witnesses reported that her movements were direct and focused. There was no hesitation, no search. She knew exactly where she was going. She moved immediately to the private suite where Todd Austin was getting his hair cut. What happened next was total sensory overload. Witnesses heard the shots multiple rounds. The peaceful Friday morning was replaced by a sound no one in that strip mall expected. The target, the successful influencer, was killed almost instantly. Police reports later confirmed Todd Austin was shot multiple times at close range, giving him no chance to react or defend himself. Clients and barbers reacted instantly. One witness described the sheer panic, locking himself in a supply closet or a bathroom stall, praying for it to be over. Tmone Williams didn't stop there. Witnesses reported seeing her yank on the locked doors of other private suites within the salon, looking for something, or perhaps someone else. Was she checking to see if anyone else was related to the conflict? Or was her rage simply unfocused, looking for any target of opportunity? The fact that she paused or escaped to try and access other people shows a chilling level of continued intent. The first 911 calls went out immediately. Within minutes, Arlington police were on the scene. As Tmone Williams left the suite and attempted to exit the building, she saw the flashing lights of the police cruisers arriving. The chance for escape was gone. In a final, definitive, and terrifying act, Williams rushed back inside the salon. Police confirmed that she then turned the gun on herself. She was rushed to a local hospital, but she later died from the self-inflicted wound. The domestic dispute had become a murder-suicide. The shock wasn't just the violence, but the speed. In the span of just 10 minutes, a public symbol of success was executed, a community of witnesses was terrorized, and 2 parents were violently erased. The procedural trauma on the first responding officers, who arrived only to witness a final, fatal act of self-destruction, compounded the tragedy. Tmone Williams had a chance to escape. Why did she turn back upon seeing the police? Was the murder of Todd Austin always intended to be a final, shared destruction, a last, desperate act to ensure they remain connected, even in death? The raw facts of the case, the shots, the pursuit, the final self-inflicted injuries, all point to one chilling category: domestic homicide-suicide. This is not simply a murder followed by a suicide. It is a singular, final event, an act of annihilation. When a perpetrator, particularly in a domestic dispute, commits murder and then immediately takes their own life, forensic psychologists call this the annihilation motive. The goal is not to escape justice. The goal is to end the entire world that contains the pain, the conflict, and the person who symbolizes a rejection. In the mind of the perpetrator, Tmone Michelle Williams, killing Todd Austin was not enough. His death would have left him free of her control, and she would have been left alive to deal with the public humiliation, the legal consequences, and the enduring pain of their failed relationship. By committing suicide, she guaranteed 2 things. First, that she would never have to witness his freedom or success again, and second, that she would be the one to write the final, unchallengeable ending to their story. The decision to return to the salon when police arrived, to choose self-destruction in a public place, is the ultimate confirmation of this motive. It was a final, tragic assertion of control over a situation she felt had utterly destroyed her life. The tragedy of Todd Austin and Tmone Michelle Williams, while specific, is part of a devastating, recurring pattern. Homicide-suicide is almost always linked to intimate partner violence or domestic conflict. In cases involving former romantic partners, the likelihood of murder escalating to a murder-suicide increases significantly. These acts are rarely random. They are the culmination of a long history of coercive control, possessiveness, and the inability to cope with rejection or separation. The successful public escape of one partner, like Todd Austin's glamorous Miami trip, can be the final trigger for a person whose control over that relationship is already dissolving. The common factor in these cases is the firearm. In the U.S., The use of a gun makes the act quick, definitive, and tragically final. For Tmone Williams, the gun represented the ultimate tool of control and the final means to erase the source of her pain, alongside erasing herself. The most enduring horror of the annihilation motive is the deliberate wreckage it leaves behind. When a parent commits murder-suicide, they are not just ending two lives. They are creating an orphan with a uniquely traumatic legacy. Psychologists note that children who lose both parents in a murder-suicide face a complex emotional burden. They not only grapple with the death of both parents, but must also reconcile the fact that one parent was the aggressor and the other the victim. This double trauma fractures their foundational sense of safety, trust, and even their identity. The financial influencer who preached stability and the mother who desperately sought control both left behind the same thing: chaos, grief, and an innocent child now saddled with an impossible public family history. The rage of the parents created an emotional void that will haunt the child for the rest of their lives. The murder was annihilation, but the spark that ignited it came from the screen. We now pivot back to the initial source of conflict, the vast, terrifying gulf between the life Todd Austin broadcast and the reality Tmone Michelle Williams was forced to witness. When police investigate a typical domestic murder, they look for text messages, arguments, or restraining orders. In this modern tragedy, they had to look at Instagram likes and comments. The internet had already delivered its verdict. The Miami trip was a primary trigger. This is where the story ceases to be a simple police report and becomes a devastating commentary on influencer culture. Todd Austin's brand was about publicizing his escape from debt. The flip side was the publicization of his escape from Tmone Williams. For the rejected partner, the successful ex's social media feed is not just photos. It's a constant, curated stream of evidence that life is better without them. When that stream features yacht trips, expensive jewelry, and messages of unrestricted freedom, it can fuel a spiral of jealousy and resentment far deeper than any private argument ever could. The comments on his post, "I'm pretty sure this post was a trigger," show that the public instantly understood the destructive power of that image. It suggests that Tmone Williams did not just want Todd dead. She wanted to destroy the life he was gloating about. The digital records confirm a history of separation, but the true depth of the domestic dispute remains obscured. We know that Tmone Williams and Todd Austin had a past romantic relationship and shared a child, binding them together eternally, regardless of their breakup. It's crucial to note that murder-suicide is rarely a snap decision. It is often the final action in a long history of escalating conflict, where one party feels they have exhausted all control. While there are no public records detailing any specific restraining orders or severe documented violence leading up to that Friday morning, the final, public nature of the murder implies a deep, festering wound. Tmone Williams may have seen the Miami Post not just as a holiday, but as a cruel, public declaration that Todd Austin was closing the door on their shared history for good. The fact that Tmone Williams chose the method of murder-suicide removes any possibility of a legal trial, which also removes the possibility of a definitive public explanation. We will never hear her side of the dispute, never understand her motive beyond the speculative lens of jealousy and rage. Her act ensured that her narrative, however twisted, will be the final one. She forced the world to remember Todd Austin not as a successful influencer, but as a victim of her final violent act. What do you think? If the ultimate goal of the successful facade is to inspire, did Todd Austin's brand ultimately fail by inspiring the wrong emotion, a rage so profound it culminated in a double tragedy? The crime was fast, brutal, and public, but the aftermath is slow, deeply sorrowful, and permanent. Once a police tape came down and the names were confirmed, the story shifted entirely from a police investigation to a tragedy with profound, generational consequences. For the vast majority of his followers and the community he mentored, the immediate reaction was disbelief. Todd Austin was publicly mourned as a successful entrepreneur, a mentor, and a symbol of hope. His death was seen as an unfathomable loss to the business community in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Tributes poured out across social media. Candles were lit. Flowers were placed outside the quiet suburban strip mall where his life ended. The funeral was held for the successful CEO, focusing on his financial achievements and his positive impact on others. This reaction showcased the power of the influencer facade. The world mourned a public figure. the man in the suit whose final posts were about freedom. But this public outpouring of grief for the successful CEO was only half the truth. It glossed over the other half. The messy, unresolved, and violent private life that led Tmone Williams to choose the absolute destruction of their shared reality. The narrative of success and inspiration was utterly shattered by a simple, brutal truth. His public glory could not save him from his private conflicts. The profound complexity of this case rests entirely on the shoulders of the silent victims, the child shared by Todd Austin and Tmone Michelle Williams. This act of final rage left the child orphaned by both parents in a single, brutal moment. The child's father, Todd Austin, was dead by violence. The child's mother, Tmone Michelle Williams, was a perpetrator, also dead by violence. There is no worse foundation for a young life. The emotional devastation is absolute. This child will grow up not only grappling with the loss of both parents, but must also face the impossible psychological burden of reconciling the fact that one parent was the aggressor and the other the victim. This specific kind of double trauma, unique to homicide-suicide cases, fractures a child's foundational sense of safety, trust, and even their own identity. Every question about their lineage leads back to a final, tragic headline. The grief of the wider family, the grandparents, the siblings, the friends, is now compounded by the agonizing task of raising a child within the echo of this public, final tragedy. Every birthday, every holiday, every family gathering will now be defined by the absence of two people, and the horrifying public knowledge of how that absence occurred. The case highlights the deadly reality that social media success is no shield against domestic turmoil. Todd Austin's brand was about control, but he utterly lost control of the private demons that pursued him to that Arlington salon. The two parents, one preaching stability and the other desperately seeking control, both left behind the same thing: chaos, grief, an innocent child now burdened with an impossible public family history. The rage of the parents created an emotional void that will haunt the child for the rest of their lives. This is the enduring truth of the double tragedy. The ultimate victim is not the influencer or the perpetrator, but the life left to pick up the pieces. The story of Todd Austin and Tmone Michelle Williams ends where it began, in quiet, affluent suburbs of Arlington, Texas. The gunshots silenced the lives, but they amplified the questions, leaving the community with an unsolved psychological puzzle. Todd Austin's public image was defined by control over his finances, control over his business, and control over his destiny. Yet, the true measure of his control was zero. He utterly failed to manage the private resentment that was building in his life. The very platform he used to achieve success became the instrument of his destruction. His brand taught followers that you could simply create a new reality. Tmone Williams, in her final desperate act, used the gun to create a new reality too, one where Todd Austin could never be free of her, and one where their shared conflict could never be litigated in public. This case forces us to reconsider the definition of an unsolved mystery. The police confirmed the who and the how immediately, a murder-suicide. But the why, the true, underlying motivation, the intensity of the rage, and the final thoughts of the perpetrator will remain forever locked away. This is the difference between a closed case file and a permanently unsolved question in the human heart. The story of Todd Austin is a stark warning that the facades we build, no matter how successful, how polished, or how inspiring, can crumble in the face of private, unchecked human emotion. We all have a public life and a private one. In this case, the private life demanded a final, fatal settlement. The family is left to mourn the loss of a mentor and the tragedy of a life cut short by rage. But the ultimate lesson of this case is about the survivors, the families, the loved ones, and the child who must now navigate a life defined by this absolute destruction. If this story shook you, we encourage you to use this tragedy as a moment to seek help or offer it. If you or someone you know is struggling with domestic conflict or emotional despair, resources are available. The final act of this story should not be violence, but intervention. This is the kind of case complex, emotional, and leaving behind only unanswered questions that we dive into here at the True Crime Cave. We want to hear your final definitive conclusion. If you could choose one moment that sealed their fate, was it the boastful freedom of the Miami Post, or was it the quiet, unresolved rage of the years before? Let us know in the comments below. Hit subscribe and the bell notification to ensure you never miss our dive into the hidden truths. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.